Welcome to Media Empires, where we sit down with the most influential media creators right now to learn exactly how they built their empires. Our aim is to extract the secrets of top-tier podcasters, newsletter authors, and media creators who are breaking the old rules for media success. Whether you're looking to start your own empire or simply curious about the nuts and bolts behind media businesses, you'll find valuable insights and tactics in each episode. Grab your headphones, let's dive in.
This week on Media Empires, we're joined by Zawwar Khan, a CPG consultant for creators. He talks about his transition from being a brand manager at Procter Gamble to advising creators, explores the rise of creators becoming business owners, the potential of B2B influencer marketing, and more.
Zawwar, welcome to Media Empires. Thanks so much for joining.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Erik.
So Zawwar, by way of introduction, can you give a brief introduction into your work today and a little bit about your professional journey and how you came to do it?
Of course, yeah. Let me start off with where this all started. I started off as a CPG guy, really through and through. I ended up as an intern at Procter Gamble, where I was on the supply chain innovation team, and loved it because it really balanced my educational background in engineering as well as kind of my passions and interests in business. And while I was there, just being a young go-getter and being very, focused on networking, meeting as many people as possible, I stumbled into a department at Procter Gamble called brand management. Department has been around for almost 100 years and has now, really laid the foundations for how brands are run today. And actually the principles in brand management were actually what developed product management that we know today in tech that I'm sure you're also familiar with. And I absolutely fell in love with this concept of brand management. The idea is like, how do you keep this billion-dollar brand moving in the right direction, even though you've got all these moving pieces? So how do you, as the hub, roll the wheel in the right direction, even though you've got these spokes like finance and R&D and supply chain and creative agencies, get them to all work together and roll in the right direction? I fell in love with that idea. And when I said, where do I apply? They said, you don't. This is an MBA only situation, Ivy League MBAs. Like, Zawwar, you don't even have a marketing degree in undergrad. You haven't even taken a marketing class. Why would you be here? And I said, give me my shot. So ended up at a case competition for our business school, kind of snuck in because I knew the people that were running it, ended up winning the Procter & Gamble brand management case competition. And I ended up as one of the youngest brand managers at Procter & Gamble. I was on the Olay women's skincare brand, my first exposure to a billion-dollar brand, the largest skincare brand in the world, right when skincare was popping off. And what I found that I really fell in love with in that role was new product innovation, is what we call it in CPG, consumer packaged goods. So that essentially means like, what are the new products that we're going to develop that are going to sit on shelves, that are going to solve our consumers' newest problems? Maybe she has dark circles under her eyes or wrinkles around her mouths. How do we go develop the right products to go solve those issues to continue to get her to, increase her basket size with us? But over at P&G, they have such a great R&D department that's whipping up Tide Pods and Swiffer and Febreze, that over there, the way the teams kind of work together was more like R&D, go whip up something really cool and innovative, and brand, just go figure out how to commercialize it. I didn't like that. I wanted to have more ownership over my consumers' tensions and pain points. So I ended up at PepsiCo, part of their Frito-Lay division down in Dallas. So think like 60% of what you see in the salty snacks aisle at your grocery store. And there I was co-leading brand innovation for our Doritos and Cheetos brand. So two more iconic billion-dollar brands. And the challenge there was real simple. Zawwar, in the 2010s decade, these brands started to slow down a little bit in growth, started to lose a couple points in share. What are the new innovative products that we're going to launch that are going to reignite excitement with not only our retailers, but also our consumers? And so that meant new flavors, new forms, new packagings, new, manufacturing practices. What are we going to do to create excitement? While I was there, we launched over 25 new products, some of which are still launching today. Grab Cheetos pretzels at your local grocery store, and 4 Super Bowl ads. So was able to go to the CMO and say, hey, this is about to be a really big bet. I need you to give me that extra budget to go really get this to its fullest potential. So Super Bowl ads with Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher, Lil Nas X, MC Hammer. And I still hold the record for the number 1, number 2 highest revenue generating innovations at PepsiCo. So had a really great time there. And then how I stumbled into creators was, had a few friends that were having some success with TikTok content houses and YouTube channels in 2021. And they started kind of reaching out to me saying, hey, we're interested in building these CPG innovations. Can you help us? So it started off as kind of an evening weekends consulting gig. I started to realize that there was a really complicated and exciting thesis here around creators who were turning into media companies now starting to also become the commerce brands behind these. And I came across so many creators that had these beautiful, innocent visions of building these commerce brands, but they didn't have the right operator support structure around them to go bring these to life. And that was disappointing for me as someone who's been an innovator, through and through in CPG, that these ideas were just sitting on the sidelines because they didn't have the right teams around them. So that's what inspired me to leave PepsiCo full time and make the jump towards kind of being the CPG consultant for creators and a lot of these brands that are coming out these days. And that's what I've been up to for the last couple of years.
That's awesome. That's a great overview. Let's talk about this creator operator trend, because it's from the outside, it seems that the following is true. One is that creators are realizing that they're heavily under monetized and could be building businesses that transcend themselves, and that even their creator life might have a limited shelf life depending on the platform. Mm-hmm. And so they're becoming more business savvy, or they're watching people who've been more successful and saying, "Hey, I could do that too." And on the other side, we see for consumer products, but all types of businesses, acquisition costs are just getting higher and higher. The platforms are getting saturated, and it's just harder to acquire users. And so that those two things being true leads to creators and operators saying, "Hey, can we partner?" So you've been at the forefront of this trend. Comment, edit my characterization, or add to a little bit of the macro trend that's happening. Consumer products is one way to monetize. Of course, there are other types of businesses. Why don't you comment on that a bit?
Yeah, so just let's think really high level about just media and commerce and how these two have had a hand in hand relationship since, let's say, all the way back to World War II. So P&G actually got their start. Procter & Gamble got their start by being one of the early adopters of television. So while their competitors were laughing at them and saying, why would you leave radio and newspaper? P&G was one of the early adopters of television, figured it out, and thus were able to beat out their competitors and their incumbents. So there's always been this relationship of there's an evolution to the next generation in media, and commerce quickly follows, and then one after the other, right? You have the Facebooks and the social medias and the Googles in the 2000s, and think of all the brands that were birthed just from that. And now it feels like as if we're going beyond just advertising at the platform level on these social medias, but now you can actually advertise with these creators who are their own personal media company. So this feels like just a natural next step in the evolution between media and commerce. And oftentimes what ends up happening here is there is kind of a price out happening in the incumbent media, right? So like, hey, people are saying Facebook's getting way too expensive. So they just start, scrounging and saying, what can we find? What can we find? And it's like, well, there's an opportunity here with influencers. They're priced at a little bit better CPMs, and we think we can get the right awareness, and we can tap into our audiences a little bit easier. So I think that's just kind of one high level way that I look at it. But I think you hit the key on the head, or hit the nail on the head, is that there is a democratization happening here around creators. We started off with seeing kind of the democratization around media, that anyone can be famous, anyone can be a celebrity, anyone can get eyeballs if they wanted to, with access to Twitch, YouTube, and other platforms. And now it's, we're kind of democratizing commerce as well. You don't have to be if you're a creator, you don't have to be dependent on ad deals. Why don't you sell the product to your audience? You know them best. They want to hear from you. It's the most authentic. So if you can do it right and you can build a great product that solves a real tension, physical product, tech product, whatever it is, then there's a real exciting opportunity there for you.
Totally. Let's get into the details a bit in terms of how you think about frameworks for both the creator and operator side for evaluating, hey, is this a real opportunity here? We're talking offline about how operators are kind of in a rush to just identify a creator with an audience to say, hey, that'll work. And similarly, creators are in a rush to pick, some product that they think sells, would appeal to their audience and find an operator. What separates a good deal from a bad deal, or an okay deal? How do you think about this?
Yeah, so I think you got to have a lot of different pieces. I often use the metaphor of like a puzzle. You're trying to fit a lot of different puzzle pieces together, and oftentimes they don't fit. But I've seen a lot of people try to force those puzzle pieces together, and then you end up with a little bit of a disaster. a conversation I was having recently with an operator who runs ghost kitchens. We were talking about how many of these creator brands today will not be around 1 to 2 years from now. And it feels like an unfair advantage that we know this when so many others seem to just be grasping at any deal and opportunity that's being presented in front of them. The ones that will transcend the creator's audience and the creator's personal brand are really going to be the exception and the anomaly. But those are the opportunities to really focus on. So from the perspective of an operator, I would say it's too easy to get lost in, oh my gosh, they have so many followers, they have so many views. I think what's more important is to say, my company, Rel Brands, is short for relevant, is saying, is this idea relevant to the creator's audience? And I'll talk about, relevance to the creator's audience is very different from relevant to the creator. So an example that I might give is, Chamberlain Coffee, a brand that people seem to know and love, especially on Twitter, and kind of rave about. My only kind of negative thought about it, or my only kind of criticism, would be that although it may be whole coffee beans and coffee products may be extremely relevant to Emma, her being kind of an early adopter of coffee at a younger age, her audience is slightly younger, and they may not be at the age or the point in their caffeine development journey where they are buying their own coffee beans or they are even just drinking coffee, right? So the product may have been super relevant for her and her videos and she's always drinking coffee, but let's think about where her audience is at and let's make sure that we're developing the right products for them. Now, obviously, as time goes on, her audience will get a little bit older and the product will seem more relevant to them. So that's going to eventually end up working out for her. But that's one where I say, hey, maybe we could have double clicked in that a little bit more to say, what is the best product for the average kind of 12 to 17-year-old girl? Is it coffee, or maybe there's other options here? From a creator's perspective, when exploring opportunities, I see a lot of creators wanting to jump into CPG and commerce right now, when they can really zoom out and they can really zoom out and look at all of the different business opportunities in front of them. It's not just commerce. It could be creating a SaaS platform. It could be doing paywall content. It could be doing a second channel. It could be moving on to a new platform. There's a variety of different ways for them to grow their top line revenue. But, taking an entrepreneurial perspective to it is always best, and to say, where can I drive the most value to my audience? So start off with the problem to solve, not with a solution. So don't come to me and be like, Zawwar, I want to launch your granola. Let's start off with the problem to solve around, hey, my audience is looking for healthier snacks when they go hiking. Okay, great. Now let's start with that, and then let's get to our problem. So a lot of folks are really eager to jump in on CPG, and I think it's for a few reasons. They've seen a couple of really big checks get cashed recently with A-list celebrities, so it seems kind of like the cool thing to do. Number two, when you're experiencing your success mostly only on the internet, you start to get a little bit jaded to the numbers. Oh, look, my video from last night got another 8 million views, or got another 1,000 followers. It's not very tangible. And I will say that there is no better feeling than launching a physical product and seeing it either in your hands or on the shelf of a store. So I think that there is that element that is kind of driving a lot of creators to reach out to folks like myself. And I would say that that's not the right way to look at it. Rather, go directly to your audience and say, what problems are you having? Why are you showing up to me? And how can I create unique solutions for you? So a really good example of a creator who did just that is an individual by the name of Danny Austin. She's kind of your, imagine her as your pretty standard lifestyle fashion Instagram influencer based out of Dallas, Texas, early 30s. And, at first glance, you don't really notice anything too specific or unique about her. But when you click onto her Instagram stories, you're met with just, like 50 Instagram stories a day. It's just, you're clicking through them one after the other. And I think it was actually a really unique content strategy, because Instagram is traditionally like a one post a week. And she was able to develop a much deeper relationship with her audience because she was going crazy with her content on those stories. So obviously that led to probably a lot of unfollows, but the people that did stick around developed a really strong relationship with her. They understood the cast of her life, her husband, her mother, her friends, her problems, her kids, her pregnancy journey. And what she talked about most, though, and which I think probably garnered the most interest because she was one of the few people talking about it, was her issues with hair loss. And sometimes her hair loss was so bad that she was actually even using wigs, which may seem a little bit non-traditional for your average woman in her early 30s. But talking so openly about this issue naturally caused her content to permeate to the relevant audiences, right? The audiences who were also experiencing hair loss. Maybe it's postpartum hair loss. Maybe they might be going through chemotherapy, whatever it is, right? Her content was being shared via DM or via algorithm to the right people. So she kind of did all of the work that a startup founder should be doing, right? Pre-launch, is talking to the right people of her that would buy her product, and also just kind of creating that community. And so she ended up launching last year a brand called Divi, which is a scalp care brand. So serums and shampoos and all of those great products for a healthier scalp and to promote like health regeneration. And from the unofficial numbers that I've heard on the street through the grapevine is 20 million in revenue in the first 8 months, which is bonkers. That's more than a lot of the major creator brands that people are talking about on Twitter nowadays. So that's just a really good example of her really leaning in and saying, why are you all really here? What is different about me versus all of the other early 30s fashion bloggers that you all are following? And she identified that pain point. She was lucky that, she was lucky that she had a husband who was able to kind of, retire and say, how can I help you grow this business? And so she had a trusted operator by her side where she could say, you can go handle building this business and managing it while I manage all of the content and media. And together that duo built a great media and commerce empire. And I'm really excited to see where Divi continues to go.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Hey everyone, Erik here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at erikaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.
Let's pretend that we were running a sort of on deck or entrepreneur first like program that matched operators and creators, and anyone we would match would say yes. And we were kind of being a bit strategic, or any creator we would ask would say yes. What is sort of your request for products, or most like if you could pair any creator with any type of product, what are some that come to mind that you say, oh, this would be a pretty big opportunity?
Yeah. So there is I really like I think I've said this once before, but I really like this idea of middle America male hobbies. This is a content niche that is growing really quickly on YouTube. And oftentimes a lot of people are overlooking it because the viewers of this content are oftentimes living in between the coasts. They're in middle America. So the way I would describe this YouTube viewer is they are someone in their mid 30s or 40s. They are a parent. They've been at their job for a little bit of time, and they're maybe starting to feel a sense of identity loss, maybe a little bit of a midlife crisis. And they're saying, hey, I'm no longer the guy I was in my early 20s doing exciting and fun stuff. My life has become a little bit monotonous. Who am I? They're looking for that passion. They're looking for that identity. And they stumble into something. That could be hunting, fishing, jujitsu, woodwork, car restoration, sailing, painting. There's a variety of these different hobbies that exist. And there's these amazing creators that are in each of these niches, especially on the YouTube platform. And there's a pretty big opportunity here for there to be commerce tied to each of these, right? So if you are the DIY home repair expert on YouTube, and I'm just a guy in my mid 30s who just bought a house and I'm looking at all your videos for advice. If you end up launching a line of hardware tools that are a little bit more ergonomic, that are a little bit more empathetic to me as kind of a beginner and an amateur, I'd be really excited about that. And even at a higher price point, I might consider buying your products over the Black & Decker and the DeWalt and the other brands, the Milwaukee's, because those brands don't really have any sort of an emotional connection to me, right? And sometimes commerce is a little bit emotional. And those brands are continuing, you know, the incumbent brands are continuing to ride on their coattails of their success on previous generations. So yeah, they've got distribution in every Walmart and Home Depot and Lowe's in the country. But what they don't have is they don't have that emotional connection. And that's how these incumbent brands are born and developed. And so, you know, I'm sure you and your audience members can think of plenty more middle America male hobbies, but I would say like there are these sorts of growing categories where people are eager to learn from experts, from people who are credible, and they have nowhere else to go. And if they were given product recommendations from these individuals, they would for sure take it quite seriously. Also, these categories oftentimes have high AOVs, so that's not too bad of a perk either.
Yeah. So speaking of high AOVs, I'm curious, like, to what extent does business like B2B YouTube exist? Like, you know, imagine a fully fledged out, you know, YouTube ecosystem of like people offering like advice for different businesses related to products that they should, you know, SaaS products that they should be buying. Are we like, what percentage of the way are like, is that going to happen? And it's not going to happen.
No, I think it will for sure. I mean, that's something that I've got my eyes on for this year, and I don't think it's going to, you know, we're not going to see probably too much growth this year, but I imagine the next couple of years we're going to see a lot more B2B influencers. And one person I like to use as a little bit of an example here is a friend, Nick Sharma, who's kind of branded himself as the DTC guy on Twitter. And so he's become kind of the central hub for folks who are D2C founders. And his recommendations around products, software, Shopify apps, strategies carry a lot of weight. So you can imagine that getting a sponsorship on his newsletter or doing a sponsored tweet, I'm not sure if he does sponsored tweets, but if he did, is quite valuable because he's got a lot of business founders that are following him. You know, and I've seen similar examples, obviously across in sales and in tech, and this is where the opportunities get really interesting and exciting for me as well. I also think there's an opportunity for direct to consumer, kind of B2C creators to sometimes push into B2B. You know, there's a couple of ideas that I've come up with that I've been thinking or just kind of ideating on, where I've said, wow, the opportunity could grow here in a B2B. So yeah, I would say that the B2B creator space is still rather small, and I expect it to grow rather quickly. I'm not sure when. But I also think a lot of creators that are launching brands today could be thinking harder around the B2B applications of any of their products or brands or tools that they're launching. Right. So if I was building the home repair, you know, the line of tools, that's a really good example. Like really simple, like it's a commerce brand, but like, why not also start selling B2B to contractors and to home repair companies and so on and so forth, and to retailers? So, you know, I think if creators approach any business with a truly business-oriented mindset, then I'm sure they'll start to tease out some B2B opportunities.
On that example, or on that note, how should creators think about sequencing? Should they start with the consumer product and then work their way up? Should they start with the SaaS tool or skip the consumer product? Like, how should people think about the trade-offs between either sequencing or, hey, what's worth doing in the first place?
Yeah. So oftentimes the answer is the path of least resistance. I use what's the right way to answer this? Let me think about it. So for sequencing, so you might say, okay, the first question around sequencing might be, well, Zawwar, I have 100,000 followers. Am I ready to launch a product yet? And I would say that it's oftentimes it's a simple calculation around opportunity cost. How much money do you think you can bring in, and how much time are you going to have to put into this, right? Would you have been better off just making more content? And in a lot of cases, I do believe that that's usually the answer, is you were just better off making more content. We shouldn't have had this meeting in the first place. Like, so once you start crossing that threshold of, okay, my audience has gotten big enough that putting a few hours of work into this per week is going to yield positive results. And that's when you start considering growing this kind of secondary business around your media content. Now, if you're trying to decide whether you want to go into B2B, direct to consumer, or software, the answer, it oftentimes lies at the end of the question around what is going to drive the most value to your audience, right? So just, you're an entrepreneur, you've worked with plenty of entrepreneurs, you know that, right? Let's start off with a problem to solve rather than a solution. Because oftentimes the question is, or the answer is very unique for each creator. Oftentimes people try to ask me, what is the answer for a creator business, for a creator business, for a creator business? But when we're talking about businesses that can transcend the creator's audience, it's no different than having a dialogue with one of your entrepreneurs on deck, right? Like, each individual, each company, each founder is on a case-by-case basis. Just because one tool worked for this founder doesn't mean it's going to work for that one. And same with these creators is like, hey, maybe this creator should launch a B2B, a two-sided marketplace for car sales like Doug DeMuro. But maybe this creator should launch a travel guide that's available for $19.99. Maybe this creator should launch a granola, right? So there's so many different directions, and it's so uniquely dependent on your audience that I always encourage creators to just talk more to their audiences. Their audience is always talking to them in the comments, but how can you create better two-way streets for you to communicate back to your audience and get feedback from them? And oftentimes they're going to tell you the answer of what is best for you to work on next.
It's fascinating. I wonder how many, you brought up the marketplace. I wonder how many of the car one, how many of those can exist and do really well. It'd be interesting if there's a marketplace investor who kind of, did a write-up of all the different marketplaces and which ones either are vulnerable or, have not been created yet, but should be, and where a creator would have a unique advantage. And if that example that you brought up was a bit of a one-off anomaly, or if there are in fact lots more marketplaces that could be built, because those are fascinating businesses that can transcend the creator significantly once you have a scale. So
the Doug DeMuro example, the cars and bids is top of mind for me, just because they just announced $37 million investment round with TCG, and once this announcement was made, it just kind of opened my eyes to say, hey, there's bringatrailer.com, which is also this kind of unique cars, kind of nationwide Craigslist kind of vibe to it. And they've got a pretty sizable market share. I think it's in the hundreds of millions in annual car sales volume. And I say, wow, that's a pretty big opportunity for them to go after, let alone the auto traders and of the world. That's the only example of a two-sided marketplace that I can think of that a creator is running. But I imagine the opportunities are pretty significant, right? Maybe I'm a creator around golf, and I realize that I've got a lot of folks in my audience that are new to golf, or mediocre at golf, right? So there's a lot of people who have old golf clubs that are sitting around, and there's a lot of people who want a used set of golf clubs. So maybe I can set up that sort of a two-sided marketplace or exchange, or maybe there's something around travel and accommodations. So I'm sure there are plenty of opportunities, and the only benefit of a creator tackling these opportunities versus just your other run-of-the-mill founder is that if you pick the right creator that has a relevant audience, then you get that instant credibility that most other founders do not have, which I think is an exciting opportunity. I just spend too much time on the CPG side of things, so I don't think too much about marketplaces, but I am excited when I see these examples.
Totally. Let's go back to the CPG side then. Let's say a creator identifies an opportunity. You mentioned the home repair one as an example. Give us a little paint a picture of what's involved. Like what's next? Like, does it take upfront capital? Like, how should creators think about what's involved in building one of these brands and how to do it well?
Mm-hmm. So there's a few different steps, and I think step one is to think about who is going to run this company. Kind of who's going to be your COO, who's going to be running the day-to-day. It most likely shouldn't be you as the creator, because you have too many other important responsibilities to keep the media engine running. So you might say that I have got a trusted person on my team today that I would like to go run this. So in the Danny Austin example with Divi, she had her husband on her team who was like, I've got a bunch of free time. I'll work on it, honey, right? Or Mr. Beast with Feastables, he's got a management team that, has an entire arm dedicated towards building brands, and they have the cash, they have the network of investors where they can go raise it around real quick, and they have a CEO who's running it, Jim Murray from RX Bar. So in those examples, the creator's taking on more risk, the creator's taking on more responsibility, but they're also able to retain a majority share of the company that they're building. The second example, which seems to be most common and popular with creators today, is I want to go partner with an operator. So I want to go find someone who is going to essentially run this company for me. They have experience in this category. They might even have an idea they're pitching me, someone essentially kind of like myself. And I might approach someone and say, hey, I have experience in snacks. Let's go launch a snack together. Here's the snack name. Here's the idea. Here's how much money you're going to make. I'll give you some equity. I probably won't give you majority equity because I'm going to be doing all the hard work. All I'm going to ask of you is to make sure you're putting out, a couple pieces of content a month and showing up to a few photo shoots every year. That's my expectation of you. And in return, you're helping me with my acquisition costs, right? You're helping me drive trial and awareness of my brand, maybe even get a couple of press releases out there. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And then lastly, where I think the opportunities have not been explored nearly far enough, are licensing and co-create opportunities. So maybe approaching an existing brand. So maybe I want to, maybe it is DeWalt, right? I want to launch a tools company, and I'm thinking, what should I go do? Should I hire my brother to go be the COO? I don't know. He's going to command a pretty heavy salary. Okay, so then let's go to the tier 2 of, okay, let me go find an operator. Actually, I don't really know any of these operators. I don't really trust them. They don't have very relevant experience. Okay, well then, as an entrepreneur, I want to de-risk and I want to prove out the model at a smaller scale. So why don't I just go approach DeWalt and say, hey, DeWalt, I've been wanting to come up with a screwdriver hammer combo tool, multi-tool for quite a while. What if you all produced it with me? We call it the DeWalt by Zawwar. Limited edition release, little Supreme drop style on the internet, and you get a lot more customers, you get a lot more impressions, you get a few email signups, you get some credibility because I'm cool and you're not. Like, you get a lot of benefits. I get to launch my very own product, my very cool idea at very little time expense and very little risk for myself because you all are doing all the hard work, the customer service, the fulfillment, the returns, it's all on you. I think that those sorts of opportunities are really interesting and exciting because although the creator doesn't get the greatest upside, they are de-risking pretty significantly on their own time and capital. And they're also able to quickly validate the success of the idea they have. Maybe they realize, hey, their audience actually loves tools, but they're interested in wrenches. They're not interested in screwdrivers and hammers. Great. What an awesome way to have that learning rather than, dropping a few $100,000 on a COO and employees and purchase orders. That's a little bit too crazy. So the right way I think about approaching like launching a brand is oftentimes by starting with your advertisers who are maybe in the tool space and saying, hey, how am I performing versus some of the other guys, right? Am I performing as well as the other influencers? Oh, wow. Okay, I'm doing kind of well in that category. Okay, great. Well, why don't we potentially pursue doing a co-create? Why don't we do a partnership here, right? Or maybe we do a licensing agreement where I make a brand with you. You all manage everything on the back end, but you get to use my name, image, and likeness, and I collect royalties. And then if that works, then maybe I go find an operator after that contract's over and say, okay, I'm going to actually hire my own COO and we're going to keep this brand going, but I'm going to own it now. So I own a little bit more of the upside. So there's kind of a phased approach. There's a tiered approach to all of this. There's a lot of different angles. There's no one size fits all. I wish I had a very clear answer for you and your listeners, but I hope what that did was give your audience a little bit of a different way about thinking about creator brands, that the back end of each of these brands are structured slightly differently. But what's most important is to make sure that the operator and the creator are incentivized for both short-term and long-term success.
Yeah, no, that's a very helpful overview. I want to zoom out and say, hey, let's pretend that we were both venture capitalists thinking about how we should be investing in the creator economy. In the last few years, there have been a number of investments in creator tools, creator financing products. We even have a creator venture fund that's investing in YouTubers. People building tools for the YouTube ecosystem. Creator credit cards, all these kinds of things, fintech. Why don't you talk about what's exciting to you, and what's not exciting, or how you would approach it from a venture capitalist perspective?
I think that the word creator economy was really blowing up in 2021, 2022, and we saw a lot of startups getting funded. It was kind of like right as crypto was blowing up, creator economy was the coolest and hottest word, and I think there was just a lack of diligence from a lot of investors because they weren't very intimate with creators. I mean, I've been working with creators for 2 years, and I would still say that I'm at a beginner levels of competency. And the reason for that is we use terms like creator and creator economy like as if creators are a monolith. But I think it's kind of unfair to use a term like creator and say that there is any sort of similarity between someone who is a mommy blogger on Instagram versus someone who is a Asian comedian on TikTok, right? Like making kind of cultural jokes. Like those are two very different individuals, two very different businesses, and very different daily routines. And so to say we're going to create a solution for the two of them feels kind of broken. Like maybe we need to be a little bit more specific about the problems we're trying to solve for. My experience, at least with a lot of the SaaS products that we're seeing success in, raising some money in 2021 and 2022, was that oftentimes they were just lacking in conducting a lot of consumer insights. For some reason or another, I think people get really scared about talking to creators directly. And because of that lack of communication, I just don't think that a lot of these SaaS products were solving real problems for real creators, or weren't gauging the total available market or size of the problem to solve. They weren't sizing the market correctly. And I think that's why we've seen a lot of those tools and platforms kind of go quiet rather quickly. I think they were also just building on the assumption that creator businesses and creator media companies have very unique problems compared to just regular media companies and regular commerce brands. But like I said, when you get to a certain level of complexity, it's a media company. It's just a direct-to-consumer brand, So I don't have too many comments. I'm not a tech expert. I'm not a really big SaaS guy, but I would say that was where I think we probably went wrong in kind of the phase one of creator economy investing. I think after this, I would be looking at a couple of different things. There's some really interesting investment strategies that are starting to pop up now around investors investing in the creator themselves, or essentially a holding company that contains the creator, their media platforms, and their businesses. So a deal like TCG investing in the Doug DeMuro Cars and Bids, that big announcement from a couple weeks ago, that's not just an investment in cars and bids, that's an investment in everything, right? Because they want to make sure that incentives are completely aligned. So Doug, if you're working on something, we need to make sure you're working on what is the greatest value, because that helps you and that helps us, right? Or when TCG invested in like Meat Eater, same thing there. Steve Rinella, if you want to go work on the Netflix show, or if we're trying to decide between Netflix show or writing another book, we're aligned, right? We are both making the decision with the same incentives. Another great example is Slow Ventures. A good friend Megan Lightcap is there and doing some really great innovative stuff. Same thing there, where she is investing in these creators, but her investments, I believe, are time bound as well. So, hey, creator, anything that you're kind of getting involved with over the course of the next X amount of years, we're going to have some sort of a stake in. So that's also really interesting and exciting to say. Like, if you want to invest in the creator economy, you don't have to invest in platforms. You can actually just invest in an individual and say, hey, I think jiu-jitsu is about to blow up. And I think that people are going to come to your channel to learn more about it. And then I would say from a commerce perspective, obviously, like, look for the creator brands that are really starting to push beyond their audience. I keep using this term, transcending their audience. What are the creator brands that are starting to see success in retail? Not just getting that retail distribution, but keeping those velocities moving in those retail spots. Great innovation, great teams. Have they really developed a CPG startup that seems exciting? But they have an unfair advantage because they have a creator at the helm to drive foot traffic and to drive sales and to drive awareness and credibility. So investing in the creator economy seems to be getting more niche and specific. And I think that's where the most exciting opportunities are, right? Go focus on the individuals that are going to win rather than focusing on these platforms that may not be solving a problem for too many folks.
Fascinating. So zooming out, I want to give an example to tee up my question. Paul Graham started Y Combinator in 2006-ish, and he recognized that young technical engineers were undervalued, and that he could teach them how to do business. And thus he invested, $15K or, then $125K for 7% of their company. And that those companies ended up, some of them ended up to be Dropbox and Airbnb and Stripe, et cetera. And so he identified a mispriced asset and built a massive kind of, institution on top of it. I'm curious if that same thing might happen in the creator space. You just named a few people, a few institutions who are getting into creator financing. And I'm curious if that will explode, and what will the YC for creators look like? We've gone back and forth on our group chat about this. And will it look like something very similar? Will it look like something that also not just invests, but also incubates, kind of like, matches creators and operators and gets some percentage? Will the financing, will it look like the deals that we're currently seeing, where it's 360 deal, more or less? It's like everything the creator does for a certain period of time. Do you have a take on how?
I have a small take, but to be honest, I think I'd be really interested in hearing your perspective. I think your audience would be as well.
Sure.
So what I've been approached for the last couple of years is, well, why not do a venture studio for CPG brands? Just bring in all the creators who really want to launch it, give them the support that they need, and take a small amount of equity for these projects. And I would say that the reason that wouldn't work is just because we've seen plenty of venture studio models before in CPG, and none of them have been able to develop any sort of consistency in results. So I am generally just skeptical as someone who has innovation experience in CPG, but maybe I'm just jaded. I've overall kind of chosen to stand away from that kind of a model, at least a venture studio. Now, what you say about YC for creators, so that essentially being like hey, can we provide you resources to build a stronger media company, and maybe even eventually like business offshoots off of that. I'm skeptical about the YC model, but I would be curious like what learnings you've had at On Deck and what how you could apply some of those principles here. With a smile on your face, I have a feeling that you've been thinking about this, so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think what On Deck figured out is, what I figured out is what I told you, basically, that there's underpriced asset, and they could take those people and teach them how to fundraise, teach them how to hire a non-technical co-founder or become the business co-founder themselves, and then kind of get off the ground, and thus they receive special economics for it. What On Deck realized is that there's a set of people who haven't even started a company yet, who are not at the YC stage, that they're not starting a company because they can't find a co-founder, or they can't get an idea, or they don't have the economic support. And so On Deck went even earlier. As I've thought about this space, and as I've talked to a number of people like yourself who are more day-to-day involved in it, it turns out, and all the guys, firms you mentioned are fantastic, but what I would say to Megan, and she's coming on the show, is that it's not just the capital. That even more so than entrepreneurs, that many of these creators are not entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs in how they think about their content business, and they're the visionary of the content business. But if you ask them to think about a commerce business or a marketplace, that's, for most of them, or many of them, that's not their expertise, or maybe not their interest. And so
sometimes a lot of people want to believe that creators can do it all, but they can't. They're really great at one thing, but it's really hard to be great at everything. So I completely agree with that assessment.
Yeah, totally. And there's no benefit. Like I remember, I was involved early on in helping some people get into venture. And one thing I was always impressed with this rapper named Nas is he partnered with Anthony Saleh and just kind of delegated it. And Anthony is amazing. And whereas I got close to, and I'm close to Baron Davis, who is a really smart guy and he's a former NBA player, and he seems to be doing a lot of it himself. And he certainly knows more than Nas does probably about venture investing, but Anthony knows more than he does. And so, and Baron enjoys it, and that's important too. But you don't get points for trying to be the expert in everything, because you can't. You need a team, et cetera. And so the creators need entrepreneurs, but creators don't necessarily know how to find. It's hard to hire an operator. That's not necessarily what they've done. They don't know how to build the business themselves. So that kind of business. So I think the YC or whatever equivalent needs not just capital, but or not even mostly capital, but it needs to find them that operator. And also serve as kind of what you were saying earlier, like also strategy. Like, hey, here's your audience today. You have a qualitative sense for what your audience needs because you talk to them all the time. But let's do just some like high level business strategy of like what is our audience buying? Like what is their demographic? What are other opportunities? And so more like 360 strategy of like, hey, here's what the 10,000 foot view looks like of what you could be someday based on who you are today. And here's what you need to do to get there. Here are the people that you need to hire. And here's maybe some upfront capital you need to hire those people. And we're going to be partners with you in every step of that journey. And as a result, we're going to own, we're going to create joint ventures and we're going to own some percentage of it. So that's what I think is the opportunity. I don't know how, one thing that's beneficial about YC is it's really scaled. I mean, YC is almost 1,000 companies a year. I don't think this is that level of scale. It depends. It's not necessarily, so it's more hands-on. But I think you get to a meaningful amount of clients or joint ventures, and you see Night Ventures and other examples that are kind of pushing the boundaries now. But those are some thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, it kind of sounds like a more long-term version of like a founder in residence or like entrepreneur in residence. Like, hey, let's try to kind of pair you up with the right individual, and if this works, you all can grow and build something really beautiful and long-term. No, I totally like that thinking, because I think it is a little bit of a kind of a dating experience. You have to find the right individual for the right idea, for the right creator. I would imagine that a lot of these applications that you're getting when you first open something like this, you're going to be rejecting a lot of the individuals just because maybe the creator doesn't have the right amount of credibility, the right scale of engagement or following, or, maybe the opportunities in commerce just feel a little bit too complicated, right? You say maybe it's just a little bit too not feasible, not viable for some reason or another. But with the right amount of volume coming in, you could probably start to find the right like founder creator pairings. I'd be really interested and excited in something like that. I think the individuals who are best slated to do something like this currently today are managers. And there's a very few amount of managers today. We're seeing kind of a revolution in how kind of managers work. 10, 20 years ago, managers used to be essentially just an assistant who had to know where you were at all times and make sure that you as the talent were getting to the right place at the right time. And now managers have kind of turned more into like a business partner. And really great examples of managers who are this kind of new generation are Cody and Cole Hawk over at Up North, or Zach Honavar, or Night Media, and a few others come to mind. These individuals, since they set up the incentive structure in a way to make sure that both parties, the manager and the talent, are being incentivized for short-term and long-term success, they're able to go forth on these sorts of long-term partnerships. The only issue that I can think of with an idea like this is if you're a third party and you're approaching a creator who already has an agent, already has a manager, there's a lot of mouths to feed in that situation. And how do you make sure they all get compensated appropriately? And then what happens when, maybe the next business opportunity shows up and all of a sudden that starts to blow up. And then all of a sudden you're not getting that creator to focus on this business opportunity as much. Or maybe, I don't know, they get selected as the Louis Vuitton ambassador of the year, right? Maybe there's a sponsorship deal that's so big, so much cash, they can't say no to it. So that's the other issue with these creators when you start getting to like long-term issues is that since they are media companies, there's a lot of really shiny things being thrown their way all the time. And so it is challenging to stay top of mind and be the most important project for them long-term.
Yeah, I think you do need to be. It'd be beneficial if you were also the manager or the agency as well. I want to be mindful of your time. This has been a fantastic interview, Zawwar. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Of course, Eric. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate this conversation.
Awesome.